Good morning from Easier Habits. I'm Alec. Meg is out with a sore throat, and given what we were talking about yesterday, the biggest blocker to her productivity is health, and today she's having throat issues. I thought I'd talk very briefly about the health side of productivity. That is something I have worked with entrepreneurs on. There's a certain point at which probably whichever way you don't handle stress well will eventually become a health problem for you. And so there's really, three main categories to think of in terms of health. There's sleeping, there's diet, and exercise. And those cover most of the main things. You might have chronic or other specific issues, but these are some of the easiest things to fix for most people with the right routines. So sleep, first and foremost, is getting to bed early and at the same time every night, but there are other things you can do. Make sure your room is dark, make sure it's slightly cool. You can do take a short walk or detach from screens before sleep. You can make sure you're not eating right before sleep. All of those things can improve your sleep. So, and that's probably one of the biggest things that you can do to improve your productivity. There are studies that show that being sleep deprived is essentially like being drunk in terms of your mental functioning. So not a good idea for entrepreneurs. And then diet is another one. I did put this before exercise in part because it can mess with your sleep, right? If you're eating right before sleep or if you're eating junk food, etc. This is one that's going to be particular for people, but generally speaking, drink lots of water. That's like the first and easiest thing you can do. Why? Because most people are dehydrated, and again, that will affect your brain functioning, as well as if you drink lots of water, then you will be hungry less and less inclined to snack on junk food. So like that's the number one thing you can probably do in your diet. But other than that, it's probably things like increasing vegetables and fruits, and balancing your protein, and if for most people, cutting out carbs. Of course, there are variations on this. One that I like is intermittent fasting. I find that once I train to do that, it allows me to do two things. One, if I'm only eating during a certain window, that prevents me from eating late and late enough to disrupt my sleep. And then the other piece is that I can get right into work in the morning, and once my body is trained not to eat until like 10 or 11 a.m., I can do that just fine. And that gives your body a chance to kind of rest from constant digesting stuff. So that is, that's also another thing that you can play around with. The last section is exercise. So we talked a little bit about exercise for Meg in particular, that she's been doing a lot of walking and getting outside. That's good, especially early on in the morning, to get early morning sunlight to help you wake up. Exercise or just getting out early in the morning is another thing you can do to help you with sleep. But walking, while it is somewhat low impact, it also, I find, doesn't have benefits. And even jogging or running, there's a benefit. There can be a mental benefit to jogging, for example. It can be the opposite of concentration, so it gives your brain a rest, shifts your brain into another mode. So if you're kind of burnt out from concentration, actually jogging can be a good break. But if you're looking for maximal physical and muscular benefit, cardio in general and jogging, I find not to be that effective. So what are some of your other options? Strangely, one of the best exercises that I have in my life is a breathing exercise. It's the Wim Hof version, but it's basically hyperventilating for taking deep breaths and exhaling shallowly. So you're hyperoxygenating, not quite hyperventilating. But it's not like panicked, like, but it's more like, and so you hyperoxygenate and then you hold your breath. And I think part of the reason why that works for me is that's really an exercise, even more so than, cardio, for my circulatory system. So when you're doing exercise, you're ramping your circulation and breathing up, but you're not actually really practicing ramping it up and down, which this breathing with the hyperoxygenation ramps your breathing and circulation up, and then the holding the breath ramps it down, and that way you I find I get, you know, a certain circulatory, like, heart rate and breathing variability, which gives me a lot of benefits. It helps make sure the blood circulates around my system, so I'm more alert. It helps lower my allergies, and it can help manage stress and wake me up in the morning. So I actually really quite like that one, but obviously that's not going to work the muscles so much. So what are your other options? So jogging is good, or walking, particularly for getting outside and getting a mental break. But in terms of physical health, there's a couple of things that I actually combine that for an efficient workout and maximum impact without having to actually, for instance, take time out of your day to go to the gym and, you know, take an hour, right? This is something you could do in like 10 to 15 minutes. So the basic principles I like and that seem most effective for me, I take from Body by Science, and it's a book that argues that there's limited, if any, research that shows the benefit of cardio, and that muscular workouts of the right variety tend to be more efficient. And a lot of the gains you get from cardio are actually like more of your muscles adjusting to be able to do the exercise more efficiently than like some kind of general circulatory lung question, or circulatory lung conditioning from cardio. I have an asterisk about that particular piece in the sense of, for instance, long distance runners develop larger lungs than other people, which would tend to say like there is such a thing as actual general circulatory conditioning, but I think probably what is more accurate to say about that statement of their no cardio is that it's very rarely the limiting factor for some people. So as someone who's had allergies and asthma, I think sometimes my lungs have been, and my you know, breathing and circulatory system issues have been sometimes the limiting factor. But for a lot of people, it's actually that your muscles are just inefficient, and so that's why they use up lots of oxygen, and or they can't get oxygen efficiently because they're not working properly, whatever. As well as other processes relating to chemicals like ATP, which I don't quite understand. That's all to say, like, cardio, not so effective. But their alternative is really interesting, which is doing an exercise for 45 to 90 seconds slowly with no breaks. So if you're doing push-ups, there's no pause at the top or the bottom, for example, or, you know, same thing with squats, etc. And so what you want to do is find an exercise where you can do it for 45 to 90 seconds, somewhere in there, but you've gone to absolute max capacity. So you're doing it slowly and with control, but you're doing it until you absolutely can't move anymore. And so that means you need to find the right difficulty, right? If you can't do push-ups for 45 seconds slowly with control without pauses at the top and bottom, you know, then you'd have to do, you know, switch to on your knees, modify it to be easier. On the other hand, if you can blow through 90 seconds of push-ups, you know, slowly, with control, and keep going, then you're probably not challenging yourself enough, and you need to figure out a variation on push-ups to make them more difficult, maybe elevating your legs, for example, etc. So those that's the general principle, and the benefit of this is it's designed to completely exhaust your muscles, but very efficiently, where since it's slow and with control, a couple of things are going to happen. You're not going to get the same injuries that you would if you're doing it less carefully and trying to go really quick. But also, like, rest obviously gives your muscles a break, so they're not under load, and so it's less efficient. But the other thing that actually takes load off your muscles is inertia, right? So if you're moving fast, you will exercise a lot of energy in that initial, for instance, in a push-up, in that initial one push off the ground. But then after that initial push, there's a certain amount of inertia, like momentum, that's carrying you upwards. So there's so during a part of that push-up cycle, like, the initial push is a lot of muscle, but after that your muscles are almost resting because inertia, momentum is doing the work. And so The slowing things down is key because your muscles are constantly under load. They're not getting this initial burst and then kind of resting and using momentum. So that principle of doing something slow for 45 to 90 seconds to where it completely exhausts you is a great principle, and what you can do is combine that with HIIT. So if I do a very minimal workout, like a 5 to 10 minute workout where I do push-ups, pull-ups, some form of squat, and some form of crunches, I can get a little bit of muscle exercise in, but I'm not going to be as sore as I would if I went to the gym. And to be honest, like, going to the gym for me is probably is more effective. It's just the least efficient option. Now, if I combine that 45-second slow exercise with HIIT exercise, that means several intervals of similar but different exercises that hit muscle groups, then I can get really sore. Like, I've just gone to the gym sore in 10 to 15 minutes. So, like, in the time it would have taken me to get to the gym, I've done a good workout that I can easily fit in multiple times a week. So my particular one looks like 12 sets, 45 seconds on, 15-second rest. And I go through, those 12 are broken down into essentially 4 sets where I alternate between arms, legs, and core. And so I have, I can't do actual freestanding handstand push-ups, but I do kind of like almost push-up shoulder shrugs, or a handstand push-up shoulder shrugs against a wall. So I'll do that. I'll do pull-ups. I'll do some variations on regular push-ups. In terms of, like, I'll do a yoga push-up where I'm going from downward dog and then curving through into upward dog and then back. And then just regular push-ups, for example, as a different set of arms, arm exercises. I'll do variations on, lunges, jump lunges, side lunges, jumping jacks, burpees or something, right, for legs, and for core, that's something like V-ups, a kind of a twisting side, side to side. I think Russian twister. I don't know what that's called. Then another version where I'm actually on one hand on my side, raising and lower my hips to work on my obliques. And I forget what the fourth one is, but that I did recently, my current version. But that's an example, and so I'm doing them slowly and with control for 45 seconds, and it is less efficient than purely working, the one muscle group, I guess, because sometimes I could last longer than 45 minutes, or 45 seconds, but I would say that overall for me, that's a good balance between exhausting myself and doing multiple reps, where I can just feel in my body that it's been a good workout. I'm sore in a good way, not in an I've hurt myself way the next day. So that is an example of a very efficient workout, but you really need to experiment with yourself what's most important for you. For instance, the breathing exercise for my general clarity, functioning, not being sick, being alert, is actually much more powerful for me than like cardio or physical muscle exercise. On the other hand, jogging might be a good way to balance intense concentration and or stress, even though it doesn't have the muscular benefits, right? Or doing it early in the morning might be a way to get yourself outside and get that early sunlight, etc. But if you want the most effective in terms of like building muscle, losing weight, etc., general physical shape, something like the HIIT, but doing the exercises slowly, constantly, carefully, no breaks, with control, etc., is a great way for a very efficient home workout. So these are all things you can try. I find that what a lot of why, a lot of people don't have some kind of health or fitness routine, or why they struggle with it, is because they often pick the wrong habit that isn't really solving their problem. So for instance, if you're exercising because you feel you should, but you're not actually seeing any results, you're likely to quit. Relying on willpower for your routines is a really bad idea. You should have routines that give you a tangible benefit that you notice. Ideally, for the best routines, it's something you can do in like 10, so between 5 and 15, you typically are in 10 minutes a day. And if you do that 3 days in a row, you can see a tangible outcome. That's kind of my threshold, for example, for exercise, right? And so I do exercise where I can see a tangible effect, a tangible benefit in like 10 minutes is something I typically go for. Now, like sometimes do I enjoy doing a 30-minute yoga session from like YouTube or an app on my phone? Yeah, sometimes that's fun. That's great to pull out. But, when I do that, I'm doing that for the sake of enjoying the yoga, but not because it's the most effective or efficient routine to have me at my peak. And there's kind of a difference between those two things for me. And so the way you get around kind of burning out on a health habit is really experimenting with several to find one that has such a tangible impact it's a no-brainer. So for me, like the breathing exercise, if I don't do that, might maybe skip a day or two. But if I go longer than say like the weekend not doing my breathing exercise, it's harder for me to wake up in the morning. I'm less alert throughout the day, and then I have a big midday slump, like a huge one at like 2 p.m. or something like that. So and so since I feel so much worse when I don't do it, fine, I might not be disciplined. I might like not do it for, 2 days or 3 days or something like that if I'm stressed or if I'm focused on other aspects of my routine. But then I realize that I'm not doing it because I feel worse. And the next day, it doesn't take willpower to start that breathing exercise up again. I just think like, oh, I feel not good. I want to do this and feel better. And so that's the kind of habit that has an outsized impact in a little bit of time. And that's the other thing, like, right, you might have tangible results from an hour-long workout, but that can be hard to keep up, right? If it's something you enjoy, if it's something you like doing anyway, and you're getting tangible results, if you have a great community at the gym, all power to you, right? Like you've crafted that into something that's effective for you, works in your schedule. But if you're starting out, try and look for the habits that are powerful in 5, 10, or 15 minutes where you can get a tangible result. And that's where it'll be easy to start getting consistency. And if you, want to push those habits further after you've been doing that for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you can start to extend that time period out to half an hour, whatever, for the routines that give you the most, both, physically, mentally, etc. So those are my suggestions for how to take health. There's a whole lot of, health ideas from sleeping, eating, and drinking, and exercise. I suggest you just pick one that you think might help you the most, find a 10-minute version of it, try it for a week. If you don't see any results, try a different habit, cycle through a bunch of habits and see. It might be that drinking more water is the thing that gives you the most effect right now, because the biggest thing hampering your alertness and your energy level is dehydration. And so instead of thinking like, oh, I need to do cardio to have more energy, which might exacerbate things if you're not getting enough water, right? Get you more dehydrated. Then that might be a step in the wrong direction. Whereas, it might be the key for you where you're really stressed, you need to get outside more, and maybe also that you tend to drink a lot more after your cardio session, so you end up more hydrated, right? Like it'll just depend highly person to person, and that's why you have to experiment personally with what's going to have the biggest impact for you. So I'd love to hear about your favorite, sleep, diet, exercise, routines, or hacks. Leave them in the comment below. If this has been helpful for you, please give me a like and subscribe. Meg and I are trying to build a community of entrepreneurs who can support each other here on the live stream or in questions and comments. And please do follow us because we are on a quest to help Meg develop a repeatable client acquisition model. Like many early entrepreneurs, small business owners, consultants, she has been, trying to scramble getting clients from different sources and just general networking, not very organized. It's been stressful because she doesn't have the number of clients she wants at the rate she wants. And so we're working towards a repeatable client acquisition model so that doesn't have to be stressful, so that she can regularly have the right kind of client who value her services coming to her, so that she's not constantly struggling to find new people and can focus a little bit more on expanding her offering, improving her offering for clients that she does have. So that is our goal. If that sounds like what you're working on, trying to get to that repeatable business model, this is in terms of revenue, getting typically this phase of especially for like a service-based client business, is usually the trying to get to somewhere between 80 and 150,000 a year, right? Like to trying to fill up your client base. Now, if you live in a very inexpensive area, then maybe actually 60,000 or something lower is working for you. But typically, these are this is that kind of phase. So if you're an entrepreneur in around that phase, that's great. If you're an entrepreneur who's already hit 150,000 and looking to scale to 1 million, we might catch up to you, but this might not be the show for you right now. All right. So thank you for joining again, and until next time, make big changes, one small habit at a time.